made the mistake of stumbling upon a horrific and sickening page while browsing the Tor browser. I don't remember exactly where I found it. It was buried deep somewhere in a link archive page. The home page described the content on the site, and I was distraught at what I was reading. It said in a red, bloody font that the experiments conducted for this website were to prove that not all humans are born equal. The people chosen to be experimented on were usually homeless, but also the unfortunate souls that happened to get caught by these sick individuals. These so-called experiments ranged from starvation and water restriction to extreme pain and torture, infections and diseases, and even infant tolerances to X-rays, pain, and heat. I had seen all those horrific, shocking videos like 3 Guys, 1 Hammer, so I thought I would be prepared for what I was going to see, but I wasn't. I made the mistake of clicking on the first link to the experiment photos. I honestly had to retain the urge to puke. I don't want to even give a description of what I saw, but I'll just say there were innocent victims, people just like you and I, going through horrible, horrible things that nobody should ever go through. Against my better judgment, I scrolled the entire page, and it only got worse. Pretty soon, a whole section dedicated to infants and toddlers came up. I had somehow made it to the bottom of the page, and then a little box popped up on the screen. I didn't know what it was until a line of text popped up. The text said, "Did you enjoy the site?" I realized there was a chat box. I typed, "Who is this?" The stranger promptly replied, evading my question by saying, "What was your favorite part of the site?" I asked the same question again. This time he actually acknowledged my question and told me he was the site owner. I told him that this was sick and inhumane and that I would report this site immediately. That was my biggest mistake, telling him that, because after a short pause he finally said, I see your name is Michael and you live in Massachusetts." He was right, but instead of clicking out of that browser right away, I typed in, "No, you're wrong." About 10 seconds later, he typed something that made my heart feel like it shriveled up, and that was my address, my complete correct home address. His final words were, "Have a nice day." I closed the browser and slammed my laptop shut. I called the police first thing before even telling my parents. When the cops got to our house, I explained everything to everyone at once. They wanted to see my computer, but unfortunately, the Tor browser doesn't save your browsing history, so I couldn't even help them in shutting down this website. The cops told us that if what I said was true, that we should find another place to stay as soon as possible. Thankfully, this was around the time that we were looking to move away anyway. I couldn't believe how fast my parents were able to sell the house and find another. I apologized to them every day for a month after this happened. I hated to have to make them go through this all. I like to think that the guy in the chat was just bluffing, but I couldn't take the chance. I don't think anybody should ever look into the deep web, as there is no good to come of it. There used to be a website on the dark web called the Silk Road. It was an underground illegal drug marketplace. I had heard about it through friends that had used it. Our weed dealer was moving out of state, and he was our only connection, so my friends started using this website and claimed that it was legit. The timing couldn't be better to score some pot since my parents were in Atlantic City for the weekend. I downloaded the Tor browser and checked it out. The biggest seller on the site was cannabis, of course. I left a comment on one of the newer listings asking for anybody to tell me if the listing was legit. I came back to the site about an hour later, and I had one new message. It was from a user named ILEB. He saw my comment and offered to sell me an ounce for a really low price, but he only does local. I've done local deals before, and I've never really had a problem with them, so I told him that I was in Washington. Turned out he lived only about an hour away from me. I suggested we meet halfway, but shockingly, he said he would just meet me in my hometown. I couldn't turn down that offer. He said he would be over after work, around 9 o'clock. I told him to meet me in the Wendy's parking lot. He asked me a bunch of weird questions like my address, who I live with. I definitely didn't want to give my address to a pot dealer, and I lied and told him I lived alone. A little bit later, he texted me telling me he found a much better place to do the deal. It was behind an old closed-down retail store at the edge of town. My sketchiness alarm was going off, but I was so desperate to get that grass. I knew exactly where that building was, so I drove over and got there within 5 minutes. I parked the car behind the building but couldn't see anyone else there. Then I got a text saying he was on his way. That made no sense because if he lived an hour away, how would he know of this place? I sat there for like 20 minutes trying to get another response from him, but he never answered. I decided to just give it up. I had a feeling something sketchy was going on and that I should just leave while I still could. It took me 10 minutes to get back home. My front door was open. I knew I had shut it, so I was worried that my parents had gotten home early. I parked my car in the driveway since my dad didn't take it and went back inside. The light upstairs in my parents' bedroom was on, and I heard some kind of shuffling noise. I shouted, "Mom and Dad," and the noise stopped. The door to the room slammed shut, and I knew something was wrong. My dad's car wasn't even in sight, and now he's not answering. It took me long enough to realize that whoever was in there wasn't either one of my parents. Since I'm a straight-up idiot, I grabbed a carving knife from the kitchen and charged upstairs to my parents' room. I practically almost broke down the door. After slamming it open, I didn't see anyone, but I right away picked up on the fact that my mom's jewelry case was opened. I grabbed the phone in my parents' room and called 911, but something grabbed me from under the bed. I used the knife in my hand to stab their arm, and the man under the bed began to scream in agony. Since it was a corded phone, I couldn't leave the room with it. All I had time to tell the police was that someone broke into my house and then gave them my address. The man crawled out from under the bed with the knife still in his arm. He didn't even look at me. He just ran straight for the front door into his car. The best I could describe him was that he was a black man with a backwards hat and raggy clothing. Then he drove a black Honda Accord. Of course, I couldn't tell the police much. I couldn't bring up the website as it was illegal to use it. All I could do was describe him to the best of my ability. So he's still out there, home free. I can only guess he got my address by hacking me somehow. On a Monday morning of 2012, I made the mistake of searching the deep web one time. I saw and read some people talking about this thing called Tor that allows you to search the deep web. It was basically a post asking for the strangest things people have come across on the deep web. It intrigued me, some of the things people have found. So, I went along and downloaded Tor. Someone on Reddit posted a link to a basically hidden wiki with a bunch of useful links to the dark web. I was shocked at how many child pornography links there were. I did my best to steer clear of anything like that. I did come across a link that took me to another page with a bunch of links called the Black Pages. The page was black with a bunch of red and yellow links. The red pages seemed to be the strangest. There was one link called Personal Assassin and another called Dead Pets. Reading some of those links, I realized how messed up this whole deep web thing really was. I clicked a yellow link and ended up at yet another page full of links. There, I found something that seemed interesting. It was called the Secret Society Chat. I clicked on the link, and it took even longer than all the other pages took to load. I'd say I stared at a blank white screen for a good minute before the page finally turned black, and the chat box popped up. Next to the chat box was a black video screen. I wish that I just clicked the back button at that point, but instead I typed "Hey" in the chat box. What happened next was weird. Someone wearing a mask sitting in a dark room popped up on the screen. I felt like my heart stopped when I saw my face pop up on the screen as well. The website was using my webcam even though I naturally keep it off. I covered it with my thumb and tried to close the page, but at this point, my taskbar was gone along with the minimize and exit buttons at the top of the Tor window. I tried hitting Ctrl-Alt-Delete, but it did nothing. And then there was a muffled, distorted voice coming from my speakers. I could only assume it was the guy in the mask speaking. He was masking his voice with some kind of voice changer. I clearly remember he said, "I still see James." My heart sank. He had said my name. I began holding the power button on my laptop, and it felt like an eternity before it finally cut power. I didn't know if I should report what happened to the police. But from what I knew, everything was anonymous with Tor. So it didn't even seem worth it. It was obviously just a low-life hacker. I went on with my life after deleting the Tor browser from my computer, but about 2 weeks later, my mom threw a letter in my room. She told me it came in the mail for me. There was no return address on it. I ripped the letter open and unfolded the paper tucked inside. In huge letters that filled the paper were the 3 words, "Don't come back." I felt like I was going to throw up from the sickening feeling it gave me. I crumpled up the paper and threw it away. I didn't call the cops as it seemed pointless, and I didn't tell my mom because it would only cause her to panic. But I have no idea how or why they got my address. Back when I got my first adult job after college, I moved into a smaller house with a roommate. The roommate was a girl I went to high school with, and we were in the same grade. However, we weren't really friends. We both knew of each other but didn't have the same friend groups. I didn't know much about her, but somehow after college we found ourselves living in the same city. We had been friends on Facebook or something, and because we both lived there and didn't know anybody else, we decided to try to become friends and live together. We were both female, the same age, and figured that it would work out, but I was wrong about that. At first, she seemed cool. I honestly forgot where she worked, but she had pretty normal hours like I did. Our bedrooms were the only 2 in the house and next to each other in the hallway. We were not best buddies or anything, but we got along well at first. However, she seemed to have sort of strange behavior. I remember noticing her leaving and coming home at all kinds of odd hours all the time. I would wake up hearing her leaving or coming home. I was a light sleeper, and the times would be anywhere from midnight to 5 a.m. I had no idea where she would be going or why, and this happened so much, at least several times a week. One time, I brought it up, asking why she was leaving at 2 a.m. She flat out denied it and said that I must have heard the neighbor. I didn't tell her I knew it was her because I realized that whatever it was, she didn't want me to know. I didn't really think too much of it for the most part, though. But one night, several months into living there, I was out late with some friends and got back home at probably almost midnight. After arriving back at the house, I went inside, and all the lights were off. I turned on some lights and also noticed that my roommate's door was open, and she did not appear to be inside. I called out her name, just wondering if she was home. I figured that she was gone again when she didn't answer. Then I went into my bedroom, changed, and got in bed. I was tired, but after closing my eyes, for some reason I had a hard time getting to sleep. I laid there for probably 20 minutes trying to rest, but it was like I wasn't tired anymore. Then suddenly I heard this noise inside my room. I had no idea what it was. I looked up and saw my closet door opening. Then I saw my roommate walking out. It was really dark in there, but I could clearly tell that it was her. This was so strange. I had no idea what she was doing in there. I sat up and asked her what was going on. As soon as I spoke, she looked over and saw me. Then she started running and darted out of my room. I stayed where I was and was just so confused. Then, probably a minute later, I heard her leaving the house out the front door. At that point, I decided that I needed to move out of there as soon as possible. For the next couple of days, I packed up my stuff. I don't know where my roommate was during this time, but she was never there when I was. She must have only been back when I was at work. Then I moved out. After that, I haven't spoken to her since. She blocked me on social media, and I still don't know why she was hiding in the closet in my room. She probably didn't expect me to get home when I did. That's why her door was open and she was in my room. She must have had to hide in my closet and waited until she thought I was sleeping to try to leave the room. I'm glad that I couldn't sleep and that I noticed her. That was by far the creepiest roommate experience I've ever had. This is the story of my freshman year in college. I went to a smaller university with only a few thousand students, so the campus wasn't very large. I liked that about this place. However, my first year, I had to live in the dorms to save a little bit of money and maybe make a friend. I chose to have a random roommate, and this decision backfired. I didn't know anybody at the college when I got there, and the first person I met was my roommate. He told me that his name was Joe. Joe was a strange guy overall. He was rude, unfriendly, and never left the room other than to go to class. He was not at all the type of person that I would normally hang out with, and by the second week, I had given up all hope of being friends with him. I had a TV and a PS4 that I brought with me to school, and Joe said that I could never use it because it bothered him. He also demanded that all lights be off after dark. I tried to reason with him once, but he threatened to report me to the dean of students. I wasn't scared by the threat. I didn't really think they would do anything, but I would rather just try to get along with my roommate. Instead, I would do my studying in class buildings around campus. I made other friends at college pretty quickly, and when I was talking with them about Joe one day, they suggested that I get a new room. I hadn't even realized this was an option until they told me, so I put in a request to get my own solo dorm room. I was told that when one became available, they would contact me. About 2 weeks later, so now about a month and a half into the school year, I was contacted. I was told that I could move into a different dorm building that was across the street. This building was a little bit newer and nicer, and it had a room available. I accepted it. I decided not to even tell Joe. I didn't know if he would be happy or sad about it, but I didn't want him thinking that I hated him or something. So, one day when Joe was gone at his classes at a time that I didn't have class, I packed up all my stuff and just left without saying a word. My entire half of the room was now gone. I moved into my new building and got my new room. It was so nice to finally have a place all to myself. I could watch TV, play PlayStation, and not have any complaints. I could even have my friends over to hang out. However, I did want to be careful not to see my old roommate, Joe. Like I said, it was a small campus, so there was a chance that we would cross paths. If we did, I didn't want him to ask me why I left or something. I was careful to avoid him, and I didn't see him at all for a couple of days. As for my new room, at first it was great, but on probably the second or third night that I was there, something happened. I was playing video games late at night and I heard somebody try to open my door. It was locked, so it didn't open. After a few seconds, I got up to look out of my peephole. When I was walking towards the door, I heard somebody knock on it. There weren't even that many people who knew I lived here yet, so I found this to be really strange. When I got to the door, I saw Joe standing there. I did not want to answer it and quietly moved away from the door. He knocked one more time and I didn't answer that either. I was really creeped out. I mean, how did he even know that I lived here? I didn't tell him and I wasn't friends with him on Snapchat or anything where he could see my location. This was really strange. I went back and looked like 10 minutes later, and he was finally gone. I didn't know why he had come here. There was no reason that I could think of. The next morning I got up and had to go to class. When I left my room, I walked down a couple of hallways to get to the front of the building. In one of the hallways was a sort of lounge study area. When I was approaching it, I saw Joe sitting in one of the chairs there. I couldn't believe that he was in my dorm building. He didn't live here. I didn't know what he was doing. I turned around and left out of another exit. I thought maybe he was following me. It was really, really strange. Later on in that same day, I was walking on campus and I happened to notice him again. There were sort of a lot of other people walking around, and I saw him a ways behind me. I walked back to my dorm building, and he seemed to almost follow me there. He wasn't walking close enough to follow me inside or anything, but I was very suspicious. When I noticed, I got back in my building and was wondering what this guy's problem was. That same night, he was back at my room once more. I was up late and he tried entering. It was locked like always, and he then knocked on the door. This time it was louder than before. I didn't answer but was watching him through the peephole. He knocked again very loudly, but I still did nothing. When he knocked for a third time, I remember somebody else who lived down the hall opened up their door. They told him to quiet down. Joe didn't say anything. Then he stood there for probably a minute. After that, he backed up a step and then kicked my door extremely loud and hard. I was honestly afraid that the door might break, but it didn't. Joe then turned and stormed off. After this, I made up my mind that I was going to report him, and the next day I did. Somebody must have talked to him or something, because I stopped seeing him after that, and he did not return to my room. I was still very suspicious that he would follow me around or show up again for like a month, but luckily he didn't. A while after this, I met someone who used to know him. They weren't really his friend, but had several classes with him. They told me that he had dropped out and also said that his name wasn't even Joe. None of these things really surprised me. I'm not sure why he gave me a fake name, but he was a weird guy. Looking back, I'm really glad that I moved out when I did. Several years ago, when I was broke, I moved to a new city for a job. This job was not the most well-paying job, but it was decent. Because I had no money going into it, though, I had to find a cheap place to live. I ended up going onto Craigslist and finding a roommate there. I know that sounds sketchy, and the truth is that it is sketchy because the guy that I was roommates with was weird. At first, he seemed normal enough, but I never actually met him in person until I moved into the apartment. We had a 2-bedroom place, and it was right outside of the city. My roommate's name was Peter, and he was thin, had longer hair, and was about my age. The apartment that we got was not very nice. It was located in not the best neighborhood, and the building was old and a little bit run down. We had a living room, a small kitchen, and then a hallway where Peter's room was at one end. The bathroom was sort of across from Peter's room, and then my bedroom was at the other end of the hallway. I knew that living with Peter would be temporary, and as soon as I had enough money to move to a better place, I would. After meeting Peter and moving in, he just seemed a little bit strange. He was not that friendly, and for the most part, he stayed out of my way, which was nice, and I stayed out of his. Peter seemed to be a pretty private guy, and didn't have much interest in being friends or anything, and that was fine. One thing he did, though, was he would forget to lock the main door of our apartment. There were like 5 different times where I know I locked the door, and then I would see it unlocked. I tried to talk to him about it once, and he kind of blew me off. This made me kind of mad because many times I remember I would get up to use our only bathroom, which was right across from Peter's room, so I would have to walk by his door to use the bathroom. Peter would be in his bedroom when I was going to use the bathroom. A lot of times when I would start to approach, I would literally hear him locking his door. It was like he was afraid that I was going to try to go into his room, so he was locking it, and I never once tried to enter his room. I never even knocked on his door, so it was annoying how he would always do that, but seemingly forget to lock the front door. In the apartment that we lived in, I would have liked to have the front door locked all the time. Luckily, though, my bedroom also had a lock on it. One night I was sleeping but woke up in the middle of the night. The first thing that I remember after waking up is that I heard somebody right outside my bedroom door. My heart started racing, and I didn't know what to do. Whoever this person was already inside the apartment, probably because Peter left the door unlocked. I then heard this noise like somebody was messing around with the lock on my door. Maybe they were trying to pick it. This went on for like a minute, but luckily they didn't get in. I got my phone that was next to my bed and I called the police. Then I turned on my bedroom light. When this happened, I heard whoever it was moving away from the door and seemingly back out towards the living room. I didn't leave my room until the police arrived. By then, I hadn't heard anything in a long time. I finally left my bedroom and saw that our front door was left unlocked again. The police came in and searched the place. While this was going on, Peter left his bedroom, apparently woken up by the commotion. He said that he didn't see or hear anything. The police didn't find anybody, and nothing was stolen or missing. I even remember when the police were there, Peter loudly said to me, "Are you sure you weren't dreaming the whole thing?" I found this comment to be a little bit rude because I knew that I wasn't. The police also heard him, and I didn't want them to think that I was just imagining the whole thing. The police advised us to keep our door locked, and then they left. After they left, I remember Peter asking me why I called the cops. It was like he was annoyed that I did. I said because he left the front door unlocked and somebody broke in. Peter claimed that he didn't leave it unlocked and he said that our lock must be faulty, but I didn't believe him. I mean, somebody broke into our apartment and tried to get into my bedroom, and Peter just seemed annoyed by the whole thing. He didn't even seem that concerned. After that, we both went back to our rooms, and I went back to bed. I really couldn't wait to move out of there. Soon I would have enough money saved up to do so. Several days went by, and everything seemed to be going normal. Then one night I was in my bedroom again. Now usually I would hang out in my bedroom and then go to the bathroom and brush my teeth. Then I would return, lock my door, and go to sleep. That was my nightly routine that I had. So on this night, I believe it was a Friday, because I didn't have work the next morning. I know that, because I was staying up much later and watching YouTube videos on my phone. It was past the time that I usually went to sleep. I think it was after midnight. I was laying on my bed, and my lights were out, but my door was unlocked because I hadn't brushed my teeth yet. I remember all of a sudden seeing my bedroom door start to open. My headphones were in, so I didn't hear anything. But when I saw this, I took them out and looked to the door. After it slowly opened, I saw Peter entering. When he saw me staring right at him, he stopped, turned around, and then left. I yelled at him, asking what he wanted, but he quickly returned to his room. I thought this was really weird and also creepy, so I got up and brushed my teeth, then locked my door and went to bed. The next day, I asked Peter what he was doing, and he completely denied it. I couldn't believe it. He suggested that I was having another dream. This made me mad, but I didn't say anything. Instead, I realized that it was probably him the night I had called the police. I don't think anybody else even entered our apartment. I mean, nothing was stolen and nothing was messed up. Plus, the person went right for my room. So I started looking for a new place that same day. Within a week, I moved out. Ever since then, I haven't seen or heard from Peter, and I'm hoping that I never do. I once found myself walking through the woods during a slight drizzle. All I had on me was my backpack with a spare pair of pants, a flashlight, a tripod and camera, and some granola bars. I'm a photographer and video editor, and I was recording footage of a forest during rain, a river during rain, and snagging some pictures as well. Long story short, I found myself lost, trying to find my car. It was the worst day of my life. I was panicking, stressed, screaming to myself in anger, just wanting to find the car. I'd say an hour after getting lost, I started to pick up on noises around me. I don't mean multiple noises at once. I mean at times I'd hear the same noise just on different sides of me. The noise was footsteps, undeniably. I was starting to panic that I was being hunted by a bear. That was only at first, though. I slowed down to quiet my own footsteps, so I would more likely hear where the other footsteps were, and when I did, I turned my head as quickly as possible in that direction. I saw half a person's body jumping behind a tree. Instead of calling out something or confronting them, I did what I still think was the smart thing. I walked away fast, playing it off like I didn't see him. It was starting to get darker every minute now, and the rain was still coming down lightly, but my heart was racing faster than ever. I checked my phone every 10 seconds and finally got one bar. I stopped walking, wiped the screen of rainwater, and opened maps first thing to find the nearest road, which was very close. I let out a sigh of relief, only to hear footsteps closing in on me from beyond. I turned and spotted the person again. It was a man, and I know that in of itself doesn't sound so disturbing, just really sketchy. But I'm telling you, the sight was horrifying. I could only see the man briefly before he jumped behind a tree once again, as if he thought I couldn't see him. But he looked huge, really tall, average build, maybe a little overweight, jeans, and from what I could tell, a dark blue jacket with the hood up, half zipped down, exposing a white shirt underneath. He also had on glasses, but that's all I got of his face. He was hiding behind a tree maybe 15 feet away, and over the sound of millions of raindrops, all I heard was, "Now, can I help you?" I didn't care anymore. I was borderline about to have a panic attack. I continued running. When I found the road, I ran until I thought there was no chance of him catching up to me. Then I continued walking until I finally hitched a ride from a passing car, who took me back to where I was parked. I didn't bother mentioning what happened to the driver. I just told him I got lost. He went on his way as I got into my car and drove the half-hour trip back home, all the while reflecting on what just happened in my life. Every so often when we were little, our parents would go away for a weekend while our Uncle Hendrik would watch us. Our Uncle Hendrik has been single his whole life, but he always loved kids, so he always happily did it. One Friday night, the same night our parents left town, we were all watching Titanic during a monster snowstorm. Me, my two brothers, my older sister, and our Uncle Hendrik. I remember certain parts of this night so vividly, but other parts I just draw blanks. I do remember, however, that the power flicked off briefly, and we had to reset the VCR to get back to where we were in the movie. Shortly after that, our Uncle Hendrik was fast asleep. We let him sleep while we kept watching the movie. It was at the part where Rosa was running with the axe back to the room that Jack was trapped in. One of my brothers was coming back from the bathroom, and on his way he went outside for whatever reason, likely just to look at the snow. He came back inside yelling for us to come take a look at something. Starved for a little excitement, I guess, the three of us ran to the back door. We could see what he was talking about now. There was a set of footprints in the snow. It led from the back door, then to the window, and then back in the direction of the yard and woods. To make the matter even more eerie, he said he heard the back doorknob turn. Our sister, even though she was the oldest by years, ran inside freaking out. My brothers and I, on the other hand, were kind of excited by it and wanted to follow the footprints. Our sister was threatening to wake up our Uncle Hendrik as she saw us putting our coats and boots on, but I convinced her it'd be fun, and we weren't going too far, and that we'd be together. She went back to the living room to watch the movie without us while we all marched out into the cold snowstorm, following the footprints that were quickly filling in with new snow. The footprints led to the woods in the backyard. The deeper into the woods we got, the deeper the footprints were. We weren't sure if that was because less snow was falling to the ground under the trees, or because the footprints were fresher. We were following those footprints for a while, until finally we saw where they were leading. To a cabin literally tucked away in the woods. It was dark inside, though no light was emitting from the windows. The footsteps led to the front door of the cabin, but we didn't dare go up to it. Instead, we crept over to the closest window to peer inside. It was too dark to see anything inside, though, but we noticed it wasn't actually a glass window. It was just a screen. Then there were two thumps from inside of the cabin, and then the sound of something sliding. We didn't see what caused the sound, though. Suddenly, one of my brothers screamed and pointed behind us. We turned to see a head poking out from another window of the cabin, but it was so dark all we could see was blackness, no features. Then the head disappeared from view as we heard rapid thumping sounds inside of the cabin, and then the front door to the cabin burst open. We all screamed and ran for our dear lives back in the direction of the house, following the footprints. I don't think we were actually chased, though. The next day, we tried taking our Uncle Hendrik on a hike to that cabin, but we couldn't for the lives of us find it. The creepiest thing is, to this day, we still live in the same house, and after all these years, we still never came across that cabin again. In fact, we can't even find it on maps or Google Earth. If it weren't for the fact that I was with my two brothers, I would question if this ever even happened. My friends, who I'll refer to as Dave and Sam, came along with me on a little camping trip near Blue Mountain National Park. We set up camp near a small pond, just because it seemed like the coolest place to chill. The point of this whole trip was mainly just to get out, drink a bunch of beers with friends, and chill. I cracked open my second Budweiser, laughing it up with Dave and Sam, talking about some of our other friends with music playing in the background, overall just having a good time. Then, however, I saw Dave reach over for the speaker, turn it down all the way, and then shushed us and pointed out to the pond. Dave whispered, "Do you guys see that?" Sam and I looked out to the pond. The campfire had a glow that partially reflected on the pond water, but even then I couldn't see what he was pointing at. Dave whispered, "There's something in the water." I went into the tent to get the flashlight from my bag. When I came out, Dave said, "Don't," but I turned it on anyway and aimed it at the pond. The light didn't reveal anything or anyone, but we did all hear the sound of water being pushed, as if someone or something were walking in it. I turned out the light just because I was freaked out and looked at my two friends who were both wearing cringing faces. I told Dave to shut off the speakers completely. Now we all sat in our chairs, not really saying much anymore, just listening to the surroundings. About an hour passed, and within that time nothing happened, so we grew more comfortable again, and things went back to normal. Eventually, I went to my tent, and Dave and Sam went to the tent that they'd be sharing, and we all went to sleep. Now that I was alone with my thoughts, however, I started thinking of that thing that Dave said was in the water. He never actually described what it looked like, if it was an animal or a person. My sense of hearing was heightened as I was in a state of alert, and because of that, I heard something from the woods. I sat up since that always seems to help with concentration. I needed to hear one more sound before I could confirm something wasn't right. There was the sound again, much closer now, and I was able to confirm it was a foot hitting the ground. Whether it was a person's foot or an animal's foot was still unclear. However, I heard another footstep, this time much closer. It was clear someone or something was sneaking around our campsite. There was one final footstep. It was really close to the tents. I started texting Dave, but I was only able to type out the words, "There's something," before the gut-wrenching, blood-curdling scream pierced through the walls of the tent. I couldn't tell if it was the scream of a man or a woman. It's hard to explain, but it was deep enough where it could be a man, but not so deep to the point that it couldn't be a woman. The scream lasted about 5 seconds. Then there was silence. I didn't know if I should get out, call for my friends, or stay silent. I texted Dave, "Dude, we have to run." He responded, "What was that?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I tried to think of what we could do. But pretty soon, Dave texted me again saying, "The coast is clear. Run for the car." I grabbed the keys from my bag, opened the zipper to the tent, and sprinted to the car, which luckily was only about 30 seconds away. We stayed in the car all night and went back the next morning for our stuff, which luckily was all still there. We still have no idea who, or even, dare I say, what that thing was at our campsite that night.